Hi, this is Grant Hebert with Wild Eyes Monitoring Solutions. Just want to give you a little bit of a presentation on some of the offerings that we have for our camera trapping customers. We'll start off with species detection and classification. Like some others, we offer the ability to run through your photos for you. We do a full AI-assisted classification of all photos, followed by 100% human verification. So where you would often get an AI report back and then you would have to go through and verify your images yourself, we do all of that in-house. So you hand off images, we classify them, we verify them, and we return to you a sorted group of images with or without bounding boxes, as well as a full CSV file with all of the detections in each image. We're currently around 75 species available in our model, covering most North American mammals and some birds. The difference between what we do and some others maybe is with cervids, with the moose, deer, and elk species, we will also provide gender and age classification. And age classification is limited to adult and juvenile, but that's about as close as we can get with camera images. So the bottom left image, for example, that's accurately identified that as a male adult moose. The one in the center is correctly identified as a adult female white-tailed deer, and in the background, probably hard to see in the presentation, is a juvenile white-tailed deer. And then on the right is a coyote. So yeah, our species detection is quite broad, and we do age and gender for cervids. There's a list of everything that's in our model. I'm not going to go through it. If there's something in there that you like, great. If there's something in there that's not in there that you want, let us know. But we cover off most of the species that our clients have looked for so far. So in addition to the species detection things, this is a new offering for us. Depending on the model you're using for your analysis, you may want to know the distance between the camera and the target, or the camera and the animal in the photograph. Some population density models require that information. So it's typically been a very laborious process of taking a bunch of measurements and then going through and painstakingly go through each and every image to try to determine the distance to the animal. We automate that whole process. All we need is 2 images taken by the trail camera. We don't need videos. We don't need extra images from different angles. We want an empty image with nothing in it, no animals, no markers, no nothing. And then we want an image with some distance markers in it, like you see in the center one. And I'll admit that the center one in this presentation is exactly the same image as on the left. I just digitally added some markers in there. But that's often what I'll do, is just write a distance on a piece of paper and staple it to a tree and set them all out. And then we just want one photo with all of those distance measurements, or somehow you get the information to us anyways. We want the furthest measured distance to be beyond the range that you're going to want to detect animals at. So in this case, we're good out to about 8 meters. Looking at this image, beyond that, things start to get occluded, so we might throw a limit of 9 on this site. We have a calibration distance in the middle there, way out at 26 meters, so that's a good one. And our closest one is 2.85 meters. So you want one that's really close, you want one that's really far away, and then you want 2, 3, in this case 4 in between, and that's all we need. Take those, and that's what we're going to base our calibration on. So if we look at the image on the left, that is a true color image taken from the trail camera. We then put that through a rather novel AI solution that outputs the image that's on the far right into a grayscale, if you will, into a grayscale image, where white being the farthest away and black being the nearest. And it creates, rather than a color image, an image that is defined by depth. So each pixel, the level of gray indicates the distance from the camera relative to the entire image. Once we have that image, we take the known images and we look at the individual pixels and we create a calibration curve for the raw depth versus the measured depth, and we create a calibrated depth map of the entire image. Once we have that calibrated image, we go back to the classification examples where we have the bounding box around each detection. In this case, we have a couple of deer in the foreground in that center image, and that image is not from the same site as the depth map, but it's just one we've used for demonstration here. So we take the bounding boxes, we pick a pixel that is in the center bottom of the bounding box, so basically where its feet meet the ground. We take that pixel location, we look back over to the depth map, we find the same pixel location in that, and we assign that depth to that animal. We then take the CSV file that was created during the classification process, and we add a column at the end of that. So for every detection, we add a depth for each bounding box. And then if you want to take it even further, and this gets a little bit nitpicky, I guess, kind of splitting hairs, but the bounding box that we provide, or the distance that we provide, is to the bottom of the bounding box, which typically, in the case of the broadside moose in the left-hand picture, is the distance to the left-hand side of the moose, basically where its feet touch the ground. In the picture to the right, we have a adult male moose walking away from us. It's actually the same moose 10 seconds later. The bounding box gives us the distance to the trailing feet. So if we want to look for the actual centroid of the animal, we can get a little creative and we can look at the aspect ratio of the bounding box. The one on the left is 990 pixels wide by 1652 pixels tall. Gives us an aspect ratio of 0.6. The one on the right is much taller than wide, and it has an aspect ratio of 2.31. We can take those values and we can create an offset. So what we do is we take that aspect ratio, we multiply it by the nominal width of the animal. In this case, I've assumed that a moose is 0.8 meters wide, and we could probably talk about that all day, but that's just the number I've picked. So for a broadside view, we have 0.6 times 0.8 is 0.48. So we detected its feet at 8 meters. We're going to offset that by about another half a meter and say that the centroid is around 8.48 meters. For the head-on shot, we said that the aspect ratio was 2.31. Again, the width of the moose is 0.8. We have an offset of 1.85. We say that the centroid is about 17.85 meters. Again, this might fall into the category of does it really matter, but it's just a way of using the geometry if you choose to. The other thing you might want to do, or depending on the model that you're using for your population density estimate, is you may need to know the actual view area of the camera. And because you're going to have regions, if you have cameras in the forest, you're going to have regions where you have a lot of occlusions. You have trees and everything else where animals are in behind them and you just can't see them. And it changes throughout the field of view of the camera. So if we look at this image here, somewhere off in the distance we have a fair number of trees, but up close we have some reasonable areas that we're going to see animals in, but it does vary as you move across the image. So we divide the image up into a user-defined number of sectors. I think our maximum is 10 and our minimum is 2. And then you have a slider bar where you actually bring a fixed wall back from off in the distance, and you keep moving it back and back and back until you get it to a point where you're going to say anything closer than that wall is where we're going to successfully detect animals. Anything behind that wall, we're going to ignore them in our analysis. So you can set those sliders for each of those 6 in this case, 6 sectors. If you were to draw lines out radially from the center of your camera outwards in your field of view, although they're going to go out as radial lines, if you look at them in a trail camera photo, they'll be pretty close to being parallel lines. So our analogy of 6 parallel rectangles is not that unrealistic. What we do is we assume then that the far distance that where the wall is going to be the maximum viewable range. We do give you a minimum value that you can set if you choose to have a minimum measured depth, that you will ignore animals within that distance. Here we've got it set to 0. So what we do for each segment is we basically calculate the area of the pie that you're looking at. So we have, in this case, we have a 40-degree field of view. We have 6 sectors. So we calculate the area for each of those 6 pieces of pie, the difference being how far out they reach. Then it gives us the area for each of those sectors, and then a sum at the bottom, so we know the total area that's viewable for that camera site. And then we provide you a CSV file with all that data as well. Really, you're just trying to give us 2 images for anything that we're doing here, at least with the depth analysis. We need an image with nothing in it, then we need an image with some markers in it. And those markers, honestly, I didn't add them to my list here, but I often pack just a dozen red Solo cups in my pack. And you can just set them on the ground and take measurements to where they touch the ground. If you don't have enough trees in your viewing area, put a couple of cups on the ground, measure to those cups, somehow note it, whether it's written on a piece of paper or whatever. It doesn't have to be a fixed thing in the field. If you have markers that are there, we just have to know them. That's why we have an image full of markers, and then we have an image with nothing in it. For actually taking the measurements, Faller's tape, I highly recommend using a Faller's tape as opposed to a big 100-foot wound up fiber tape. They're a very dedicated use tape. They're used by fallers who drop trees down and have to buck them to length on landings. But the beauty of them is they clip onto your belt loop. You do not have to hold on to them. They have a hook on the end that you could hook into either the camera or the camera enclosure. And it's a constant rewind. There's always a spring load on it. So your hands are free. You literally walk away from the camera towards something you want to take a measurement of. As you get close, you grab the tape that's trailing behind you, hold it in place, take your measurement, let go of the tape. Your hands are free to write on your binder or whatever you have, and you just walk around. And as you walk back towards the camera, the tape rewinds. They're a wonderful tool for camera trappers and very accurate. Mine is imperial and metric, and it works great. Rangefinders are a popular choice. I would caution you to understand the abilities of the rangefinder and make sure that you're happy with what you're going to get out of it. I've said accurate to at least 0.1 meters. Most rangefinders have a resolution of 0.1 meters and probably an accuracy of plus or minus 0.2 maybe. So if you're measuring up close and you have a very tight view shed, using a rangefinder is going to give you some inaccuracy, and I would just caution you on at least understanding that. So if you're trying to take a number of distance readings that are all fairly similar distances, remember that you're working with something that has a pretty low resolution, and your curve fitting could end up a bit like darts on a dartboard. So just be cautious of that. It works great at long distances. I have a set of range-finding binoculars. I find them great if I'm measuring far distances. If I'm measuring anything that's inside the field of view of where I expect to be animals corded, I will use my Faller's tape, hands down. I threw it on here too, the Mosier. I don't have one. I've never used one. I've seen them in use. I've never heard of them being used for camera trapping, but if somebody has one or access to one, I'd be really curious to hear how well they work. It's effectively a box full of gyros and accelerometers. You place it at a datum point, you zero set it through Bluetooth to your smartphone, You then pick it up and walk it out to the various places in your view shed, and it will record its position relative to that initial position. They say that they're accurate to 0.3%, which is going to give you much better resolution than your rangefinder. I have no experience with them. I would love to see somebody use them one day in a camera trapping application. And then the typicals, markers and paper, and I always carry a pad of regular paper. I like to use the waterproof paper as well sometimes, but it's pretty expensive. You can write on it with a dry erase marker and then wipe it back off and reuse it. It's nice. It just doesn't, turn to mush in the rain. But yeah, I'll often just write a value on a piece of paper and literally staple it to a tree. That way you just come back to the camera, flag the camera one time, capture all of your distances, and you're done. I always recommend that servicing cameras, especially when you're setting them up, is to go out with two people. However, if you are like me and you end up in situations where you're out there by yourself, having that ability to just snap one image of a whole bunch of distance values is very nice. So that's about all I've got. If you have any questions or comments or thoughts, this is how you can get a hold of us. We're available anytime at all, and feel free to give us a shout or email us or what have you. So thank you for your time, and good luck with your camera trapping.